King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Chapter 12. The White Knight Returns. King Arthur, joyous in his victory, rode forth to seek the knights of his court who had ridden with him to Tintagel. But meanwhile Duke Mordaunt recovered from his wounds and plotted against King Leodegrance once more. "Surely the White Knight is gone, and no new challenger in Cameliard can defeat me," he thought. He rode to the walls of the castle and called out a challenge to King Leodegrance. "I make you a fair offer. To-morrow I ride out in the meadow with 6 of my most noble knights. If you can find 7 knights to take up our challenge and defeat us, I will renounce all claim to Lady Guinevere. But if you cannot, then not only will you give me the lady to wed, but you will hand over to me 3 of the best castles in your possession." With that his herald blew his trumpet, and off rode the Duke. King Leodegrance was in despair, for the White Knight had disappeared for 2 days, and Leodegrance knew of no one else who could help him. He went straight to his chamber and shut himself inside, for the marriage of his daughter to Duke Mordaunt was a thought he could not bear. Meanwhile, word reached Arthur and his knights of the Duke's new challenge. So together with his nephew Sir Gawain and 3 other brave knights, Sir Geraint, Sir Ivaine, and Sir Pelleas, King Arthur rushed back toward Cameliard. On the day of the challenge, the morning passed and part of the afternoon, and still no knights faced Duke Mordaunt and his companions. Then suddenly in the distance appeared a cloud of dust, and out of that dust came 5 champions, riding at great speed. The people of the town recognized Sir Gawain, Sir Ivaine, Sir Geraint, and Sir Pelleas, for they were knights of the great renown. Leading them was the White Knight, who had returned in their time of need. Duke Mordaunt arrogantly addressed the White Knight. "Several days ago I condescended to fight you, and you were lucky enough to unhorse me. But that is a more serious quarrel. I will not fight you unless you tell me who you are and what your rank is. Besides, we cannot fairly fight you, as we are 7 and you are 5." King Arthur would not answer, but Sir Gawain lifted his helmet and replied: "Be aware, Duke Mordaunt, that I am at least of equal condition and estate as you, and the White Knight is above me. You should be honored to contest against him. And as to 7 against 5, the odds are equal when you compare your valor to ours." At the sound of these words, Duke Mordaunt turned red and made ready for battle. A great hush fell on the crowd as the combatants turned to face each other. But in the first pass King Arthur and his knights unseated 3 knights. Including them was Duke Mordaunt, who was defeated by the White Knight. The strength of the White Knight's spear blow was so severe that Duke Mordaunt was instantly killed. Arthur then turned to his knights and said: "My battle is done for the day. Now they are 4 and you are 4. I will watch the valor of my knights from afar." With that his knights returned to the list and easily overcame the knights from North Umber, who had lost all will to fight after Mordaunt's death. A great shout went up from the people of Cameliard, and they opened the gates to welcome their heroes. But while King Arthur's knights entered the gates, the White Knight himself was nowhere to be seen. For the next few days King Leodegrance entertained his guests and thanked them for their assistance. Every one in Cameliard was happy and felt sure that peace had finally come. No one paid any attention to the reappearance of the gardener's boy who always wore a cap. But then a herald from King Ryence appeared boldly before King Leodegrance. The herald informed him that King Ryence was greatly displeased by the fate of Duke Mordaunt, and reissued his challenge for certain territories. Unless those territories were handed over, King Rents would attack Cameliard with a large army. Once again King Leodegrance was plunged into despair. Once again he wondered where he could find the White Knight, who had already rescued his kingdom twice. He called his daughter before him, because he had noticed that the White Knight seemed to have a special regard for her. "My daughter," he said, "do you know how to summon the White Knight? We need his help, for our enemy Rents is threatening at our doors." "You had sooner ask the gardener's boy about the White Knight than me," answered Guinevere. "Foolish girl, do you jest when the kingdom is in danger?" shouted her father. "Nay, father, I do not jest, for I have noticed that whenever the White Knight is present, that boy is missing, and whenever that boy is here, the White Knight cannot be found." The king at once ordered the boy to be sent to him. When he appeared he was wearing his cap. "Take off your cap in my presence," demanded the king. "I cannot take off my cap," King Arthur answered. But then Lady Guinevere, who stood beside the chair of King Leodegrance, spoke up. "I do beseech you, for my sake, take off your cap." At these words he took off his cap, and King Leodegrance immediately recognized him. He knelt before him, took Arthur's hands in his, and said, my lord, is it you who has performed these wondrous deeds?" Guinevere was astonished beyond measure. She had thought that Arthur was of noble blood, but did not realize he was the king of the realm. Arthur noticed that Guinevere had turned pale and addressed her softly. "Lady, what cheer?" "I am afraid of your greatness," answered Guinevere. "Nay, lady, rather it is I who am afraid of you," said Arthur, "for I love you so deeply that whether or not you have feelings for me is my deepest concern. Do you have feelings for me?" "I do, my lord," said Guinevere softly. "Do you have strong feelings for me?" asked Arthur. "Yes, I do," smiled Guinevere. Then Arthur bent his head and kissed his lady before all who were present. There and then they became engaged to be married. Shortly afterwards King Arthur led his army to victory against King Rents. He then looked forward to his marriage to Guinevere and bringing her to his court as his queen. Chapter 13. The Round Table Established. In the early fall of the year, King Arthur, at his court in Camelot, prepared for the arrival of his bride. In readiness for the wedding, the cobblestone streets were strewn with flowers. All along the way the royal couple would pass hung tapestries of gold and crimson. Everywhere flags and pennants floated in the warm, gentle breeze. King Arthur eagerly awaited the arrival of the Lady Guinevere and her court, and at last the herald announced them. King Arthur and his court of knights brought King Leodegrance and Lady Guinevere with great ceremony into Camelot and the royal castle, while all the townspeople cheered lustily, and when high noon came the entire court went with the great pomp and majesty in the cathedral, and there the two noble souls were married by the archbishop. The bells of the city rang out joyfully, and all the people outside the cathedral shouted acclaim. For Arthur was beloved of his people, and all were happy in his happiness. What followed was the most magnificent wedding feast ever, and all marveled at the courtliness of Arthur and the beauty of Guinevere. This day also became famous in the annals of chivalry, for on this day the Round Table was established, which was the very flower and the chief glory of Arthur's reign. In the middle of the afternoon Arthur and his court entered a splendid pavilion that Merlin had built with magic. The walls were painted with wonderful figures of saints and angels. Overhead the roof depicted the sky and the stars, and in the midst of the sky was an image of the sun. The floor was a pavement of marble stones, set in squares of black, white, blue, red, and other colors. The center of the room held the round table with seats for exactly 50 knights. At each place was a gold plate with bread and a gold chalice filled with wine. When the king and his court entered, suddenly music was heard, but there were no musicians seen. Merlin took Arthur by the hand and led him to the center. "Here," he said, "behold the Round Table." Merlin showed the king the various marvels of the Round Table. First, he pointed out a special high seat, wrought in precious woods. This was the royal seat for Arthur himself. And as Merlin spoke, suddenly on the back of the seat in gold letters appeared the words, "Arthur, King." Opposite the royal seat, Merlin told Arthur, was the seat Perilous. Only one man in all the world was worthy to sit there, and if anyone unworthy tried to take the seat, he would suffer death. Thus it was called the seat Perilous. "Merlin," asked Arthur, "can we fill the seats of the Round Table with 50 knights?" "No," answered Merlin, "for right now there are only 32 knights noble enough to sit here." And Merlin called off the name of each one, and as he said their names the words in gold letters appeared on the back of the seats. "When the table is complete, and there are 50 worthy knights," Merlin continued, "then your reign will start to fall into disorder. For when any man has reached the crowning of his glory, his work is done, and God shatters him. So might a man break a chalice from which so wonderful a wine has been drunk that no lesser wine should ever touch it. When your work is done, God will shatter the chalice of your life." The king looked calmly at Merlin and said, "Old man, your words are always filled with wisdom and wonder. Whatever fate befalls me, I will work for God's purposes." Thus was the Round Table established with great pomp and ceremony. The Archbishop of the Canterbury blessed each and every seat, and each chosen knight took his place at the table. All those who stood near the place, both knights and ladies, lifted up their voices in loud acclaim. Then all the knights arose, and each knight held up before him the cross of the hilt of his sword. Each knight repeated, word for word, the oath that King Arthur spoke, for this was the covenant of their knighthood. They would be gentle to the weak, courageous to the strong, and terrible to the wicked. They swore to defend the helpless who called upon them for aid. They would hold all women sacred, and they would defend one another in any way they were asked. They were to be merciful to all men, gentle of deed, true in friendship, and faithful in love. Each knight swore to the covenant and then kissed the hilt of his sword. All who heard their oath shouted once more in acclaim. Then all the knights of the Round Table seated themselves. They broke bread and poured wine, giving thanks to God for what they ate and drank in the eternal brotherhood. Thus was King Arthur married to Guinevere, and the Round Table established. Chapter 14. Queen Morgana's Anger. Queen Morgana le Fay, King Arthur's stepsister, was a cunning enchantress. She was the mistress of so much magic that with her potent spells she could work her will on all things. In earlier years she had been the pupil of Merlin, and next to him she was the most powerful magician in the world. But unlike Merlin, she had no gift for prophecy. Lately, Queen Morgana had grown angry with King Arthur for what she perceived as a slight. Her son, Sir Bodmagus, had not been deemed worthy to become a member of the Round Table. Queen Morgana grew more and more bitter of this affront, and she felt she could have no pleasure in life unless she punished Arthur. But Queen Morgana was aware that she could never do her brother an injury as long as Merlin was there to protect him. She knew that to destroy the king she would have to destroy Merlin first. At her court lived a young girl of marvelous and bewitching beauty. She was of royal blood, being the daughter of the King of Northumberland. Her name was Vivian. Vivian was wise and cunning beyond her years, but she had no heart and was cold and cruel inside. Queen Morgana liked her and taught her all the magic and sorcery she knew. Yet Vivian did not feel any love toward her mistress. One day Vivian and Morgana sat together in the garden of Avalon, Queen Morgana's country, looking out over the beautiful ocean. Finally Morgana asked Vivian, "What do you desire more than anything else in the world?" "Lady, I would most want the wisdom you have more than anything else," answered Vivian. Queen Morgana laughed and continued, "It is possible for you to become as wise as I am, and even wiser too, if you will follow my orders. For I know a way in which you may obtain that wisdom." Vivian pressed her, and the queen went on. "Listen, I will tell you. You must know Merlin, whom you have seen several times at the court of King Arthur. He is the master of all the wisdom that is possible for anyone to possess in this world. All that I know of magic Merlin has taught me, and he knows many things that he has not taught me. Merlin taught me when I was young, because I was beautiful and caught his eye. For Merlin loves female beauty above all things in this world, and so he taught me magic, and was most patient with me. But Merlin has a gift which belongs to him alone and which he cannot communicate to anyone else, for it is instinct with him. That is the gift of seeing into the future. Yet, though he can foresee the fate of others, he is blind to his own. He confessed this to me several times. Now, Vivian, you are even more beautiful than I was at your age, and besides, I will give you a certain charm that will make you irresistible to Merlin. He will love you so much that he will impart more wisdom to you than he did to me. But you must know, as your beauty fades, he may regret imparting this wisdom to you, and may lay a spell upon you to deprive you of your powers. For the world cannot hold two people who know so much magic." Vivian listened with a great deal of attention, and when Queen Morgana had ended, she said, "Dear lady, all that you tell me is wonderful, and I want to know all Merlin's secrets. If you will help me in this matter, I will be forever in your debt. And do not worry about the danger involved, for I will use the knowledge Merlin gives me to cast a spell upon him, and he shall never again be able to harm me or anyone else. I shall play my wit against his wisdom, my beauty against his cunning, and I believe I shall win this game." Queen Morgana laughed so hard she could not stop. "Certainly, Vivian, you are cunning beyond your years. Whoever could suppose so young a girl could bring about the downfall of the world's wisest magician?" With that she put a thin whistle to her lips and blew. Servants came in carrying a casket of alabaster filled with precious stones. Morgana took out two rings, one with a clear white stone, the other with a bright red one. "Vivian," she said, "look at these two rings. They each possess a spell of incredible potency. For if you wear the ring with the white stone, whoever wears the ring with the red stone will love you with a passion so strong that he will do whatever you want. Take your rings to King Arthur's court, and use your cunning to bring down Merlin." Vivian took the two rings and gave Queen Morgana thanks beyond measure.